Hello, everyone. Once again, welcome back to another episode of Second and Saints. John Hendricks alongside Ross Jackson. We're coming at you to preview the Saints Cowboys game. Ross, how are you doing today, my man?
Oh, I'm great, man. I'm great. I'm ready to get on the road to Dallas and see how this game goes, man. How are you feeling?
I'm great, man. Obviously, a big, stuff we had to deal with Hurricane
Yeah.
Francine, but we kind of were in communication. So hope everybody that tuned in is tuning in that you guys made out okay and such. But it was a crazy, crazy storm. It's part of living here. It just feels like it kind of just like came out of nowhere and stuff. But
Yeah,
you
that
told
one
me
was up
your
out of
guys are
nowhere for
good.
sure.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
guys are good
yeah.
over there and good over here. And so a lot of our colleagues are good too. And so that's always a good thing. And so hopefully you guys didn't have a lot of damage and stuff like that. But at the same time, everybody knows what they kind of get in with this, right?
Yeah, we're all ready.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not over with. That's the crazy thing. Not until November.
That's crazy.
So
That's right.
gosh. But Ross, getting into football talk, obviously we looked at week one. We knew kind of where the Saints were kind of standing going into this game. With the Panthers, that is that hey, we
Hmm.
expected them to win. We wanted to see certain things. I feel like we saw everything we wanted to kind of see and some. And as we kind of discussed in our post game recap after the game, which again go back to past episodes, like subscribe, all that fun stuff. But we talked about, hey, was this the real team? And we're kind of banking and seeing as they go into Dallas this weekend, is that the real Saints or is it just kind of a blip on the radar where they beat up on the bad team and now here's the good team and all this other stuff? How are you kind of feeling about this matchup?
Yeah, my thing going into this matchup is that it gives the New Orleans Saints an opportunity to prove things from a comparative standpoint. I think that they prove things from their standard standpoint. And so, what I mean by that is, what is this team's identity? What are these teams' standards? What are the things that are intrinsic to their DNA that they'll do on a week in and week out basis? What is a New Orleans Saints offense? What is a New Orleans Saints defense? Those things to me are independent or at least non dependent of the opponent that you're facing on the opposite side, right? And so I think that that to me is something that I would be watching out for if you're, as you're watching this game, is now you get into kind of um, the competitive comparative side of the game for New Orleans, who's going up against a team that, by all intents and purposes, in terms of the way that they're discussed and everything like that, is a uh, more talented or just as talented. I'll frame that to whatever framework works for everybody. But you know what I mean. That's of an upper echelon to what Carolina was. You know what I mean. And so I think that that's the big thing that we get to learn this week. I think the Saints did things that were improvements upon themselves in terms of their standard. Now we get to see if they've improved enough to do what they couldn't do last year and beat tougher teams. They beat up on the teams that were considered worse than them last year. This year, they have to be able to beat some of those games that we would, or teams that we would call like stolen games. They got to go get a few of those.
Yeah, and this is a great test. And they got one right
Mhm.
behind it with Philly at home. And
Right.
so again, this kind of sets up where, everything we saw in training camp, everything that we saw, this offense kind of hit all cylinders, still things that weren't there, like the Taysom Hill usage was great, but he really wasn't a big factor in the win. Neither was Chris
Mhm.
Olave, which is I think the biggest thing to appreciate is that hey, they were able to do what they did on offense without having to get their two marquee players,
Yeah.
them going in a way, but obviously they got Alvin going. But when you get Jamal Williams going, you see kind of what they saw in him in the first place. Get him going a little bit, get Foster Moreau going in the receiving department. So is Juwan Johnson, Rashid Shaheed. I mean, there's so many good things and good elements that we saw from this game. And now they're facing a much tougher defense, a much tougher front seven. And this is kind of like we've talked about this for months is that this is really going to be the proving ground for this offensive line is can you
Mhm.
handle the Dallas front seven, specifically Micah Parsons? Because if I'm Micah Parsons and I'm the Dallas defense and Mike Zimmer, I'm putting Micah Parsons on Trevor Penning as much as I can. Just
Right.
how it is,
Yeah.
right? Like, and
Yeah.
I think that's the smart thing. And so, look, I know the Saints aren't favored to win this game, right? I think I've seen every single preview. I understand that. I get it. Dallas, and for all intents and purposes, kind of like what you said, it's a superior team. They're one of the better teams in the NFC. They've made the playoffs. The Saints, they haven't. They haven't been in the playoffs in 3 years. Otherwise, maybe people would be talking about them more. But it is
Sure.
interesting that the narrative kind of swapped this week that people were bad mouthing New Orleans early and saying all this other stuff. And they quickly changed their tune because of what New Orleans was able to do. But, this is going to come down to execution for me, I feel like. And for me, I can be okay with this team losing this game if they show up for 4 quarters. Like, I think the
Yeah.
biggest problem that I have had with some of these other teams is like, yeah, there's no quit in them, right? But
Hmm.
get down in a hole. You have to abandon your game plan. You're playing from backup, garbage time, all this other stuff. And then you get it close at the end, but that doesn't really tell the whole story. So I could be okay with them potentially coming away losing this game if they can prove to me that they can play 4 quarters, be in it with Dallas the whole time. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this game goes best for New Orleans if it doesn't turn into a shootout. If they
Right.
can drag out a slugfest and it's all defense and all run game, then I think that the Saints, that's where they get their opportunity to really have kind of a puncher's chance in this game. I expect, just like I expected in the preseason, New Orleans to win the opening game against Carolina, but then drop the second game against Dallas. That was always the way that I expected the season to begin. But I'm with you. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, and I get it. No moral victories and all those other things. I get that. You get to say that when you're a good football team. You get to say no
Sure.
moral victories when you're a contender. When you're not a contender, when you're trying to prove you're a good football team, you take the moral victories. And so I
Yeah.
do think that it would be important for New Orleans to be able to show, hey, we can hang around for four quarters and show up and play to their team, play to their system, play to their scheme, play to what is now their identity, proving that it's their identity. I don't think they should change anything about what they do based upon what Dallas does. Maybe you implement certain things that are already a part of your identity, that are already a part of your DNA, that specifically attack Dallas in a certain way that you want to, but you have to do the things that are core to who you are as a football team. We haven't seen the New Orleans Saints have that to fall back on for probably the past 3 seasons. I would include Sean Payton's last year in that, to where they were kind of identityless, if you will. And
Hmm.
that like they're a very different team in that way based on what we saw last week. Here's an opportunity to prove that. Don't panic when you get behind. If you get behind, don't panic that you're going up against a team that is a bigger challenge than the first team that you went up against. Just play your game. That's what I'm looking for the New Orleans Saints this week. If they can do that, then I feel really good about them going up against Philly in a couple weeks at home, for instance, and things like that. So like there's a lot of ways the Saints could potentially lose this game to where I still come out feeling good. If they come out of this game with any kind of win, I don't care what kind of win it is, any kind of
Yeah.
win, you're feeling even better about them no matter what. I don't give a crap what the win looks like at
Yeah.
that point. You go out
No,
there and
I
you
don't
beat
care.
that team in Dallas, which I think has a 16-game home win streak right now or something crazy like that. Like you'll take that. But there are versions of a loss that I would still walk away going, okay, I feel really good about where this team will be in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and look, we don't want to sit here and think like we're making excuses or anything because honestly, I mean, with spoiler
Right.
alert, I'm taking New Orleans this week. I think they can pull off the upset. You
Nice.
know what I
All
mean?
right. Yeah.
We'll talk about that, but I know they're like a less than a touchdown favorite or a
Mm-hmm.
touchdown 6.5 points, I
Underdog.
think is
Yeah.
what the spread is on the underdogs. But look, I think that Clint Kubiak is obviously going to be under a microscope. So is Derek Carr. I don't think Derek Carr is the one that the pressure's on. I think the pressure's on the offensive line. And
Agreed.
when you look at this, good news on the injury front Friday is Lucas Patrick. He didn't have an injury designation. He's dealing with that toe injury. So it looks like he'll probably play left guard as of right now. Now, the other worry is obviously Taliesin Fuanga dealing with a
Mm-hmm.
back injury, specifically back tightness. But Dennis Allen kind of saying, hey, we do feel good about him, and he's kind of one of these players who's a lot more mature. We know he can kind of miss practice and still be able to get there. And obviously, it's a concern because anything back related is a problem. But
Yeah.
that's a big focal point. Is Taliesin Fuanga going to play in this game? If he doesn't, it's probably going to go to Landon Young. We probably would expect that, but I think this is more about this offensive line being able to generate some run success that opens
Yeah.
up things. I mean, this is football 101. Establish the run to open up the passing game and then make Dallas kind of guess a little bit. If you can take some of their best weapons out of the equation on the defensive side, then I think New Orleans can do a lot better. I think Taysom Hill's a guy that to me is going to be bigger in this game plan, right? I just feel like
Yeah.
an area you want to go is, it's going to be hard to get yards in the trenches, but Taysom Hill's a guy just like Alvin who can get you yards on the outside and do a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's this offensive line. I think that's the biggest question mark. Can they do better than what the Browns were able to do, which Browns weren't able to really do anything, right? You know what I mean? And so it's a little bit hard. And so Dallas didn't really have to do too much there. I mean, you got special teams going, they got their, their defense getting after it and stuff. And of course, we saw it last week that, Derek Carr talked about it. Defense was giving them short fields to work with, which obviously helps out the offense. But, offensive line is probably my top key, quote unquote, to this game. What about yours?
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree with that. I think that that's kind of where this game starts and ends for New Orleans. I would say the next thing that I would watch would be Alvin Kamara. I think that this team has to be able to travel its defense, has to be able to travel its run game. And look, Dallas, for all intents and purposes, and being a fantastic pass rush team, not the greatest run defense in terms of what they showed against the Browns, and it's something that they struggled with last year as well. And so New Orleans might have a little bit of an edge there. And even if Dallas performs better in the run, the enemy of any good run defense is space. And I thought that was something that the Saints did a really good job of last week, is creating space, the play calling, getting to the outside. I mean, even just looking at that first 5-play drive and the way they think could be a sequence that built from first down to second down to first down, second down, third down on the touchdown strike to Rashid Shaheed 59 yards downfield. You saw everything led to the next. And I think that's something that New Orleans did really well. And you can do that when you're getting space in the run game by either moving your offensive line off the ball, these zone runs, getting to the outside, whatever it might be. Yards before contact was a big piece of their success last week against Carolina. If they can replicate those things against Dallas, I don't rule them out of being an upset contender in this game. But I think it's got to start with their run game, and then everything kind of builds from there. And then the defense has to be able to hold up so that the Saints offense can actually lean on that run game as opposed to getting into that shootout of sorts.
Yeah, and I guess my biggest thing too is knowing what the Dallas pass rush is like and knowing what they're able to do. Do you try to dink and dunk them, or do you just kind of say, let's stick to the game plan, let's try to see what they give us, and then really just kind of open things up here?
Yeah, I think there's a version of both, right? Like, I think that their game plan is still not necessarily dink and dunk, but at least like taking advantage of your timing routes and stuff like that, right? Slants, screens, things like that, things that'll still get the ball out of Derek Carr's hands quickly. But if you're able to infuse space into that Dallas defense, to go back to that word, then all of a sudden that 6-yard pass becomes an 11-yard gain, or you get to pick up a few yards after the catch and things like that. That's where I think, and this is where I commemorate, celebrate, whatever, give the New Orleans Saints their credit when it comes to what they played against Carolina, is that like when they opened up that big gap by the end of the second quarter, they just kind of went back to the same stuff over and over again. They didn't give anything new away after probably maybe the first drive of the second quarter. And so they only really did this much of what they have to offer, I imagine. And I think that that's a good thing when you can come out of week one and effectively have a defense across you that still doesn't have tape on what it is that you want to do. That's a really good situation. And I think that was illustrated in the fact that Chris Olave had only 2 catches, that Taysom Hill was a big part early, but then they kind of throttled it back a little bit with Taysom a little bit later. He still played a big role, but his role was just different because they didn't need to give as much away. I think that gives the New Orleans Saints maybe a little bit of an advantage and an edge. Not necessarily in a game-winning perspective, but just a little bit of an advantage or an edge over what they would have had or could have had if they had to show a lot more in that week 1 matchup.
Yeah. Commend, I think, was what the word you were looking for, by the way.
Commend, thank you.
Commend, like a commendation or something. Sorry.
Yeah.
Not like we're trying to correct each other. We're just trying to help each other.
For some reason, I had in my mind that commend was negative. Like, oh, I wanna like commend the Saints. I don't know why I had that as like a finger.
You might be thinking of condemn. Like condemn.
That's probably
the
what
Saints.
it was. Yeah.
All those
you're on the words today. I'm not in the words today. You're on the words.
That's okay. It's okay. I had my afternoon cup of coffee, so that's probably why. I don't know. But it's a fun, exciting time. It's a good weekend and stuff. So and I guess going, offense is one thing. But flipping to the defense, right? I think that obviously Dak Prescott's just got paid, and getting pressure after him, getting him down is going to be another thing that you have to worry about. They've got a run attack, right? That's another thing that they got to look at, Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, this is a thing where the trenches are going to be tested, and, looking at the health of this defense, Brian Brzee and Isaiah Foskey were 2 late additions to the injury report. Both are questionable. Brzee's dealing with the illness, but it sounds like he's on the trend. But Isaiah Foskey back tightness is becoming a common theme now. Like it was
Mhm.
hamstring, all these other things. Now it's back tightness or something. So we'll see how he is going into this game. But beyond that, Tyron was dealing with a heel injury. We only saw Willie Gay Jr. for 9 plays last week. He left, but he doesn't have an injury designation. The big one's Marshawn Lattimore. I mean, he's going to
Mhm.
be going all the way up to game time. He's going to travel with the team. They're going to try to take this down as far as they can, but he's dealing with that hamstring injury. I know he feels good. Everything I've heard about it, he's feeling good. I just don't know if it's going to be game ready for this week. But not having him in the lineup, is that going to be the worst thing? Because you got CeeDee Lamb, you've got Brandon Cooks. There is no Jake Ferguson, so that obviously helps out a little bit.
Right.
But does the Saints, do they match up defensively well against this Cowboys front seven or front offensive line, and can they do enough in the secondary with what they have?
I think they I think that they can, based on the fact that like we have seen New Orleans win games without Marshawn Lattimore.
Yep.
And they've won games without Marshawn Lattimore against really good receiver groups. The tricky part is that you have a little bit of an unknown. I'm going to be really careful about how I say this because it's not truly how I feel, but it's what I know to be the truth. Um, you have a little bit of an unknown in Kool-Aid McKinstry, right? Like he's a
Mhm.
rookie. He's a rookie. He's never started in the NFL before. He played just over 20 snaps last week. Looked pretty good with the exception of his first snap. He looked really, really good throughout that time. But is he ready? And I think like look, New Orleans isn't going to change anything about what they do defensively if Marshawn Lattimore is or is not on the field. They're going to do the exact same thing that they would typically do. Maybe you give Kool-Aid McKinstry a little bit more safety help every now and then or something like that. Like you find some way to help him out. But for the most part, like they drafted Kool-Aid McKinstry because they thought that he would fit well in their system. And that was the point. And so what do? You plug him into your system and then you move forward. So I think that if they don't have Marshawn Lattimore, if the system does enough, and especially because you still have a very good corner in Paulson Adebo, you have a corner that has entirely changed his perspective on the game of football, it feels like, and everything. And in Alontae Taylor, like he is just such an electrifying dude right now and everything. And then, yeah, you get Kool-Aid McKinstry in there and see what he can do. I think you can be okay. Like your principles are still going to be your principles. The Saints aren't going to change themselves because Marshall Lattimore is not in the lineup. And so I think that when you're a team that's able to do that and kind of stick to your guns, rely on, who you are, I think that you can overcome some of those absences. I think Marshawn Lattimore could play this weekend if
Yep.
he's healthy enough to go. But I would understand, especially with a hamstring, because if a hamstring is not fully healed, it's a matter of when, not if it gets worse. And so is it
Right.
worth risking that for an early loss in week 2 or an early win in week 2? I don't know if that's necessarily worth it. But I do think there's a world in which he could play. But I also think there's a world in which the Saints could be okay on the defensive side. Maybe not great, but at least okay on the defensive side if they have to go to Kool-Aid McKinstry instead. And if the pass rush is able to take advantage of 2 rookie starters on Dallas's offensive line. I think that's the other thing we should be looking at too.
Yeah, and I guess that's the just a quick one. You would expect Kool-Aid to take the outside and keep Alontae in the slot if
Yeah.
Marshawn doesn't play. I would
Yeah.
agree with
Yeah.
that. I don't think you take Alontae out of the equation. Think
Mm-mm.
you play him in the slot. He's excelling in the slot. You just don't mess with him. But I do feel
Yep.
good. I mean, shoot, you could. I'm not saying you put Rico Payton out there, but the way the dude's been playing, I mean, he's kind of riding a hot
Heck,
streak. You
man.
just don't know. Like that would be really refreshing to see as well. But no, I mean, I'm with you though. I do think that the pass rush is going to be huge here. And even though Chase Young didn't have a sack last week, man, did he affect the quarterback?
Whew.
Did he affect? And you saw all the data, all the analytics, all this other stuff. Like that was exactly as advertised. And I don't care. Like I get sacks are one thing, but if you can disrupt the play and then it lead to nothing or a turnover or whatever the case may be, I'll take that every day. Now, of course,
Yep.
need to get Carl Granderson going a little bit more. You got to get some of these other guys from the interior. Like it needs to come together a little bit more because Bryce Young had a little bit squeaky and got away a little bit too last week. But this is a big thing for me is Chase Young. Whoever he's matching up against is going to be a big part of what they do. I
Mm-hmm.
think we didn't see a lot of the Saints, like they held Tyron out because of that heel. Mario didn't play the whole game, which deservedly so. You had the game well in hand, so it's
Yeah.
no reason to put some of those guys out, but I would expect them all to play 100%, in 90 to 100% of the snaps. And Chase Young's rotation is going to be fascinating to watch because I know Cam and Carl is going to be in there, but when they go into the third down package, Cam will twist inside and they'll put Chase Young out there. And so dude was really good. And man, it just echoed everything that we saw in training camp. And I just could not be happier about what Chase Young brings to the table, but he's going to be a big factor in this game, whether the Saints can get pressure or not.
Yeah, yeah, and look, he's got a lot of familiarity going up against Dallas and going up against Mike McCarthy's offense too, because he did it when he was with Washington and everything, and so he's got a little bit of insight that maybe these other players are able to kind of glean from as well. They could potentially help to make them better. And then you've got veterans like Chase Young and Cameron Jordan again going up against. You got a rookie left tackle in Tyler Guyton. You've got a rookie center in Cooper Beebe that's got to deal with that interior pressure and everything. Real opportunity to be able to maybe take advantage of some of the inexperience on the Dallas Cowboys offensive line and force Dak Prescott off of his spot, keep him uncomfortable in the pocket because look, he's not the same guy as an improviser as he was pre-injury and everything like that. Like later on in his career, maybe not even the injury having anything to do with it, might just be at the point of his career and everything, which isn't to say that Dak Prescott has gotten worse or is bad or anything like that. He's a very good quarterback. It's just that he's not his rookie season when he was outside the pocket, creating, extending plays, all those other things. He's not the same guy. He wants to be able to stand and deliver from the pocket. It's early in the season. He's not going to want to take as many hits because he wants to be able to extend his time for this season, especially with the new contract and all these other things. Like there's a lot of pressure for things like that. And so I think that that's something to watch out for too, is can New Orleans just move him off of his spot, keep him uncomfortable, and keep him off the timing with those two particular wideouts or pass catching options in CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks. That would be something that would play the New Orleans Saints, that the defense can do, that would play the New Orleans Saints secondary back into plays if needed, but also allow the front four, front seven, right, if they blitz from that second level like they did last week, give them an opportunity to get home and make a play.
Going up to Jerry World, it's going to be a lot of eyeballs. Look, the schedule makers, I said this, they missed the boat because this should have been like more of a primetime matchup or something. Like it should have been something, but Fox's top crew is going to be calling this game. Saints fans are going to travel extremely well for this one because it's just Dallas. I mean, it's only several hours away and such, but look, you're right. Dallas does have the winning streak on the line, all this other stuff. But I think this is just more about, can the Saints prove who they are? Like, can we see, are they legitimate? Are they not? And again, no matter how this goes, the team's not going to be defined by a week 2 win or loss, right? Like even if they, poo-poo the bed, it's just not going to dictate anything. But you do believe that they've made some strides here to be able to at least contend for 4 quarters. That's my belief, at least.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, when it's all said and done, put you on the spot, just like we picked last week, which we were both right, but we didn't see them putting up 47 points. We thought they were going to win comfortably, but we definitely didn't see them putting up 47 points. I don't think anybody did. And if you did, show me the proof. Show me the card.
Right.
Not sponsored by Cardinals. Not yet. But at this point, so who you taking? And then when it's all said and done, we're gonna learn X about the Saints.
Yeah. I'm thinking Dallas. I think New Orleans covers. I'll go Dallas 23, Saints 20. And I think you still walk away feeling pretty good about what you see here. I think one of the things that can flip that score, Saints 23, Dallas 20, is how well Clint Kubiak is able to attack Mike Zimmer's defense with his familiarity of Zimmer's defense from Minnesota. That could be a really, really kind of underrated wrinkle in this game. But as of right now, until we can see that, I'll say Dallas 23, New Orleans 20.
Okay. I mean, I understand. I get it. And I don't think anybody's going to fault you. I told you guys early in the episode, I'm taking the upset this week. I'm going to take the Saints. I'm going to take them 28-24. I just feel like this Saints team, and then obviously you hear a little bit of locker room chatter today. I feel like they're pretty focused, right? And I don't question that. Not that they shouldn't be focused or anything. I just think that they have a unique opportunity to really show up here and to prove to the rest of the football world that they are serious, that they do belong after all the people, all the outside opinions, everything under the sun has been said about them that has been negative, bad, all this other stuff, critical, whatever you want to call it. But I just got a feeling. I just think that they can go into Dallas. I think they can get a win. I don't think it's going to be super pretty, but I think they're going to do just enough to be able to come out and be able to hang with them until the half. I think they can kind of try to distance a little bit in the third quarter. It's going to be close, but Dallas is going to try to rally a little bit later, and it's going to just come down to one of those wire things. And I think the defense is going to be what ends up saving them at the end of the day and end up getting a win for them. Just
Love
me.
it.
And I can be completely wrong. You guys can obviously come back to this. We'll talk to the post game, and then but we're 1-0 on the season, and we're not always going to agree on everything. But I think it's too easy for me to take Dallas, and I can understand it. So I just do feel I'm going to take the upset. I just feel it this week, and call it for whatever it is. And
My
some
fingers are
people probably
crossed
think
for it.
they've traveled.
I want the
Yeah.
upset.
Some people probably think I've traveled in the future and got the score, but I promise you I haven't. I haven't figured that out yet. So no quantum leap here. But yeah, well, Ross, as we're winding down, obviously safe travels to Dallas tomorrow. But what you got coming up on Locked On, because I'm sure you got content flowing, and LouisianaSports.net, which is doing exceptionally well out there. And if you guys aren't seeing Ross out there, make sure you tune into him. He's working his tail off.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Yeah. Over at Locked On Saints, we'll have one more Saturday episode coming up. That'll be your 5 things you need to know going into this game. We'll kind of recap just kind of the 5 most important storylines going into. Be a little bit of review, but maybe for folks that were, busy over the week, considering that there was a hurricane, it's a good little catch me up for you and everything like that. So a good primer to get you ready for Sunday's matchup. And then over at LouisianaSports.net, lots of stuff in terms of just getting you up to date on all the injuries, what to watch for. 5 things will be over there as well. And then taking a look at kind of what the Saints need to do to pull off an upset is a big piece that I'm working on. Because I think there's 4 kind of core things they need to do to be able to upset the Dallas Cowboys. So I'll kind of dive into what those 4 are and why. So that's a bunch of what's coming up. Then standard elevations, like, the typical transaction, type stuff as well would be up over there. What you got over at Saints on SI?
Yeah, look, Friday I put out my fantasy advice, so I'm doing a weekly fantasy column and a betting column. So check that out. If you've got any feedback, let me know. But I put that out on Friday evening. The betting stuff will be out on Saturday, which I hit some pretty good ones for you guys if you did pay attention. So definitely check that out. And then, of course, plenty of game coverage. Game day we're working, and then tomorrow we'll be working as well. So just keep an eye out for all the stuff that comes down the pipeline. Follow us on Twitter. Check with us here. We'll have the post game, show again as well. And you guys have been fantastic in that. And so we're still figuring out a little bit of our rhythms and stuff like that. But again, we at minimum we're bringing you a preview, a post game. We'll figure out what we want to do with film, figure out other things like that. But look, can't thank you guys enough for the support. Hopefully, when we talk to you on Sunday evening, it's from a Saints win. But even if they don't win, I don't think that people should be worried. And again, it depends on how this game plays out. If they come in and they just fall flat on their face, they get down in the hole, then okay, nothing's really changed. But I just don't see that happening. I think they have what it takes to at least hang in there. But we're gonna find out. We'll see. Any thoughts, shots, parting remarks that you have before we get out of here, Ross?
No, man, I'm all good. I'm excited to see how this one goes. Can't wait to bring everybody the post game.
Yep, same here. Well, if you're not following Ross on Twitter, and I'm not calling it X, make sure you go follow him, us as well, and then obviously LouisianaSports.net and Second and Saints, and then of course Saints News Network on SI. And so that's going to do it for Second and Saints episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, visit all the links and stuff that we have in the bio, descriptions, all those fun things. You guys have been great supporting us. Just continue to do it, and we'll be here again. So that'll do it for us today. On behalf of Ross Jackson, John Hendricks signing out. Have a good one, guys. Thanks, and enjoy the game.
Love you.